Other developments, South Africa's G20 presidency faces a difficult balancing act of managing geopolitical tensions as the country hosts the global peers in Cape Town. Reaction is expected to U.S. President-elect Donald Trump's threat on the BRICS bloc. He's promised 100% tariffs if the grouping stops using the dollar as global reserve currency. GIBS Center for African Management founding director Dr. Adrian Saville speaks to us about this development. Thank you so much for your time, Adrian. First, what is the expected reaction out of G20 based on this threat that we got later in the end of the weekend?
If you take this at face value, I guess it's a bit of a surreal suggestion. The word that you used, threat, I think is well placed. And, to my mind, it evidences first order thinking. And it's very hard to imagine that the leaders of the other members of BRICS or the members of BRICS haven't, considered what might happen to them if they pivot to use another currency or their own currency or some newly crafted currency. Doesn't require thinking too far in terms of strategic implications. So for this to be made a threat that if you do this, then that will happen. To me, it just seems very, very surreal and saber rattling and chest beating.
What tough position does it put South Africa in as we walk into this G20 presidency in terms of balancing the act and, pulling a rabbit out of the hat and basically playing nice with the rest of the world, Adrian, because we are on a shaky ground in terms of the flip side of the coin in South Africa sits in the middle?
Well, as we go into our festive season here, imagine inviting, two sides of your family over. To have a celebration at your home, and the one side of the family is threatening that if the other does something, then this will happen. It creates a tense situation. It's not that we were sort of naive or uninitiated to the likely threats that would come out under a Trump presidency. What I would volunteer in thinking about the likelihood that these things happening, I think the likelihood of this happening is exceptionally low. But it doesn't change the fact that the narrative is a very, very direct and challenging narrative, and it injects tension. You make a good point. It injects tension and awkwardness into an environment where you're trying to achieve sort of resolution, meeting of minds. It's worth just taking a breath here and thinking about the changed landscape over 2024. In all of human history, we have never had this proportion of the world's population going to the polls. This has been, without question, the busiest year for democracy in all of history. And we've seen huge changes through the year. France struggles to form a government. The UK has gone from Conservative to Labour. The US starts the year with Biden. They finish going into Trump. India must form a minority government, etc. South Africa, government of national unity. So we've gone from, we have behind us now in the rearview mirror quite dramatic political change. But we also have that change now is behind us. And so we've got an opportunity to go into 2025 with far greater certainty. And I think that presents a real positive opportunity. However, it requires people, who can place trust and confidence in a negotiated or negotiation process that, what we say is what we're going to get. And I worry about the Trump administration when it comes to that.
It sure is going to be a tango in negotiation tables. And as a parting shot, Dr. Saville, I must also ask about the reality of implications here. If there is a stern threat that de-dollarization is not going to be accepted by the US, where then is the impact for South Africa and BRICS nations? Do we carry on as we initially thought we would be in terms of the additional BRICS membership that we have, and maybe going at it alone?
So, the developed economies still represent the bulk of South Africa's trade relationships. They continue to provide the bulk of our capital from an foreign investment perspective. It's very hard, to suggest in a single breath that we can do this without them, and we're going to go it alone. In all of the work that we've been involved in our modeling of economic transition and transformation, functional connectedness is a critical component. And the direction that this walks in is the opposite direction of functional connectedness. So, whilst it would be, naive just to say, don't worry about this, everything's going to be okay, I think we have to try and position ourselves for figuring out how we handle perhaps an awkward or difficult situation. And here I would cast our eyes to India as a fantastic role model, where India has been, India, I think, gives a masterclass in diplomacy on being able to have multiple parties at the table, often parties who won't speak to each other, yet they're able to derive a very workable and functional outcome. So, rather than thinking about what does it look like if such and such happens, I would suggest that better time could be spent thinking, how do we handle this under a Trump administration? How do we cope with a more volatile world?
Thank you, as always, for your input. GIBS Center for African Management founding director, Dr. Adrian Saville, talking to us about the latest that has come out of the U.S. with President-elect Donald Trump threatening against de-dollarization as the G20 gathers. Staying now, or moving on.